Okay, hello, hello, hello. This is the 7 o'clock news. Hey, hello, Francois. And my name is John Pallett, and this is the Namibian Environment and Wildlife Society. We're very happy to have you all here, and we're very happy to be in this newly renovated hall of the Scientific Society. Thank you, Ruth, for allowing us back in and for tizzing it up nicely for us. And yeah, so that's where we are. I have to consult my notes. Okay, so this, have we said hello to the Zoom people? The Zoomers and the Boomers, are they online? Are they? Okay, very good. Okay, so we're all happy to have had a nice rainy season, and the snakes are all fattening up on the mice which are running around out there. They might run into your house, and that's when you want to have someone like Francois Theart close by to come and give you a helping hand. Francois is passionate about snake conservation and human-snake coexistence. He's produced books and papers about snakes and actively trains professionals in snake handling and awareness, and I think we've got some of them here. Who are the snake freaks in this audience? Okay, yes, you are most welcome. And maybe I should retract the freaks, but yeah, you are still most welcome. Okay, good. Francois has also set up the Snake Conservation Association of Namibia, which is dedicated to awareness about snakes. Do come in. And the peaceful coexistence of snakes and people and snakes. That is the organization you can call when there's a cobra in your bathroom at midnight. So Francois and one of his teams then catches that cobra and takes it out of your hair and out of your hassles, and you think it's all hunky-dory, but what happens to the snake then? And that is the issue that was concerning Francois. So he's got a research project to describe to us, and this is where I hand over to Francois. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. So, yeah, this is, it's a bit strange being back in Windhoek. Over the course of the last couple of years, I've been across the country. I was first based at Makuti, Etosha for about 2 years, came back to Windhoek, and now I'm based in southern Namibia, where I'm managing the Loven River Rewilding Project. So conservation has always been a passion of mine, and snakes more of an obsession. So to give you guys an idea of experiences and how long we've been working with them, I've been actively involved with snakes for about 18 years now. And, you know, it's a topic that scares the living daylights out of everyone for some strange reason. I don't know why. And then I've also been active in snakebite management over the course of the last 12 years, I believe. I am one of the founding members of the Namibia Snakebite Interest Group, along with Dr. Base, Dr. Simon. And then I'm also serving on the National Neglected Tropical Diseases Working Group with the Ministry of Health and Social Services. Now, one of the things that bug me a bit about the research, no offense to Francois Becker, who is a taxonomist, taxonomy is a bit of a dull subject, and it doesn't seem to address the grassroots issue we have in terms of human-snake conflict. Now, there's a couple of issues that come with this. Well, issue number one is people get bitten. And when people get bitten, either they lose an arm or they die, which is a big problem that we're facing in Namibia at this current stage. Everyone knows about the antivenom crisis, which we warned about in 2016 already. Fortunately, that has been addressed. And then one of the other questions we wanted to answer is it the best thing possible, you know, to catch snakes and relocate them? Now, a brief literature review has showed that if it comes down to snakes, they do not do very well when it comes to relocating them, and especially if you relocate them at longer distances. So I went through a bunch of papers in terms of rattlesnakes, and again, some elapids in Australia. And what was quite staggering was that what I found in the literature was that snakes had a mortality rate of about 50% post-relocation, which is a major issue. So the question is, so yes, we remove plus minus 200 to 300 snakes a season in Windhoek. But is it the right thing to do? And what is that impact going to be on the populations where we're relocating these snakes to? Now, that's a very difficult study to do. So this is why we started this project. Now, a disclaimer about this project is that we run into some speed bumps when we started this. And one of the main things was that the trackers were still too big to implant into the snakes. Now, remember, if you're doing any work on any animal, that tracker has to be less than 5% of the body weight of the animal. And zebra snakes are notoriously slender snakes, and they're not very big. So we only managed basically to implant about 3 snakes on this study. Well, initially 5, of which 2 died after relocating them. One was stomped on by blue wildebeest, I believe, and the other one just disappeared into thin air, and we could never actually find it again. So this was some of the roadblocks that we had to deal with, but we still got some relatively good data from it. But in the long term, when it comes to managing snake conflict, I think it's very important that we understand how far we can relocate these animals. And I mean, a 50% mortality rate is incredibly high. So the question is, we're going to continue the study, but the question is, if we find that our snakes have 50% plus mortality rates post-relocation, what is going to be the best management plan moving forward? Is it going to be easier to kill them slowly and release them, or is it going to be easier to euthanize them and give them to the National Museum? I'm sure Francois Becker would appreciate more snakes, more snake specimens in the museum, but this is a very difficult question to answer. And unfortunately, when you're working in the field of science, you cannot be very overly sensitive, and you have to make the best possible decisions. Right, so that little map you see up there was based on a research paper that I published along with Dr. Morgan Hauptfleisch and Gami back in 2021, which was 3 years worth of data in terms of snake removals in the city. Now, to give you an idea, over that 3-year period, we removed 509 snakes across the city of Windhoek. 70% of all of those snakes were venomous. The most common ones were pufferers and zebra snakes, there's no surprise, and the least common one was the black mamba. During that time period, we removed about 10 black mambas in Windhoek. So if we're looking at non-venomous snakes, the most common ones we got were brown house snakes and sand snakes, of course. But you see, the big issue that we're dealing with is that translocation is often uncontrolled. Now, there's a couple of hurdles that we still have to deal with, and that is getting permission from landowners where we're allowed to release snakes and from the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism. So no, we don't go anywhere just to release snakes. Unless you owe me money, you might find one in your garden. But so what we try to do is we always try to play by the rules and do the right thing, you know. So we don't release snakes wherever we feel like we want to release them. That is not how we operate, and that is not according to our permit conditions either. Now, as I mentioned earlier, previous studies have shown that snakes do not do well if you relocate them too far. Now, if we can relocate them, we need to kind of figure out what is the minimum distance we can move these snakes. So is it going to be 20 kilometers, 15, 10, 5? What is going to work the best for us? Now, obviously, in Windhoek, that is not the easiest thing in the world to do, because 99% of the people living in Namibia and Windhoek absolutely despise snakes. So we need to figure out how translocation typically tends to impact snakes in Africa. And to date, not a single study has been done on relocation of African snakes. And at least the hypothesis that I had was that different species will typically react differently to translocation. If you look at snakes like pufferers, for example, which are slow moving and have relatively small home ranges, they are going to die the quickest. Now, if you look at stuff like zebra snakes, for example, it's a highly adaptable snake. They're trash cans of the snake world, and they will pretty much eat anything, including tampons. Don't ask me how I know this, but that is the case when it comes down to zebra snakes. So, which is why this was such an important one for us to focus on. So you're probably wondering now, how the hell do you actually put a tracker into a snake? Now, I'm not going to go... Yes. You're not serious. Oh my goodness. Still nothing? The presentation. Do you know how to work Zoom? Because I'm terrible at Zoom. Okay. Working? Bye, donkey. Okay. So it goes to show that taxonomists are better than ecologists, I would assume, at this stage. Yeah, so, when we initially started this project, we decided that when we're going to do translocation, we want to try and keep it to a minimum distance of about 15 kilometers. Now, I'm not going to tell you where exactly we released the snakes, but it was on the private farm, and it was with permission of the landowners. So we're in the clear. But for security reasons, I'm not going to share where we released our snakes, but this property is not in use anymore. We also tried to, when we released them, we had to monitor these snakes almost on a daily basis. Now, unfortunately, technology is not at the stage yet where we can put satellite tags on snakes. So this includes a lot of manual labor, which most of my snake handlers know, and most of them spend time out in the field helping me to run this project, which I'm deeply grateful for, and they had a nice expensive petrol bill afterwards as well, which saved me a bit of money, so that's good. So we also wanted to determine which habitats these snakes typically tend to utilize, and then the data of this study was aimed to be used in order to come up with a snake management plan. So currently there's no management plan for snakes in Namibia, not in the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, and not in the private sector. I think MET is a bit scared of snakes at this stage, but we're getting them there. We're getting them there. So I'm not going to tell you how the hell I catch the snake, because most of you probably know, and there's a YouTube channel for that as well. But to give you an idea of how we would do this, so this is it working? No. Yes. Anyway, so this is pretty much the size of the tracker. It's about 1.5 centimeters long and a centimeter in diameter, and weighs approximately 5 grams. Now, it looks like dynamite. I don't know. No, it's fine. We'll wing it. I don't know how that got through the airport security, but somehow we managed to get it here. And all of those trackers come from a company in Canada called Hollow Hill. Now, that little tracker you see there costs about 4,500 Namibian dollars for one. And then that doesn't even cover your vet costs to implant these trackers. Now, what we had to do when we got the snakes, we had to anesthetize them, which was done at the UNAM School of Veterinary Science by the very renowned Dr. Marie de Villiers, who's one of the very, very few vets, if not the only vet in the country, that works on snakes. And she's absolutely fantastic, and without her, this project would not have been possible. Now, the trackers would be implanted pretty much down towards the cloaca, and the antenna would have been fastened then to the ribs to prevent it from migrating, which was a a challenge we had the first time we implanted the trackers, because we noticed that some of the trackers migrated along the snake's body. Now, whenever we're working with dangerous snakes, it's also very important to be responsible. Now, if we would anesthetize a snake, what we would usually do is place the snake into a tube. You can see Mr. Levy from NBRI there, who's also one of our snake catchers. And we would place the snake inside a tube, restrain it, hook up the machine, anesthetize it, and then obviously implant the tracker. The snake would then stay about 24 hours with us just to make sure that surgery went well. And then obviously we use our telemetry gear. Now, every single snake has a unique code which we would punch in, and that will give us basically an idea of where they were moving to, etc. The worst part about this is that often in a day we could easily have walked about 10 kilometers trying to locate a bloody snake. The issue we had was that once they go down into burrows, your signal strength decreases quite a bit, and because the area we were working in had quite a lot of hills and mountains, we would have signal bounce. So you would end up walking in 5 different circles before you actually get the signal, which is a lesson many of the snake catchers sitting here tonight also learned. So this is part of the challenges that we also faced in doing this. Now, when it comes to, so this is just a crappy little thing I put together just to give you an idea of how these snakes moved. And what was really interesting, initially, the first snake we released, within the first day of its release, it moved 1 kilometer. Now, what does that tell us? Now, to most of you, that might not seem as something significant, but if you look at it, this snake was immediately trying to get back to a habitat where it felt comfortable. Now, if you look at the previous studies and everything else that was done, it shows that relocated snakes or translocated snakes would move more frequently and further distances than your resident snakes. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have any residents to compare them with because we couldn't find a zebra snake big enough for a tracker, unfortunately. So this was part of the issue. But the red dots you're seeing, that was the male that we released. He measured in at about 1.8 meters. The green dot was the female, and the purple dot was also another female that we relocated. But this male initially moved very, very far. And he was also the snake that we relocated the furthest of any of the other snakes. So from the point of capture to point of release for this snake was about 20 kilometers, where for the other two, it was between 15 and 10 Ks. So that might have had a very significant impact in terms on why they were moving far less in comparison with the male that was moved 20 kilometers from the point of capture. You can see me on my bakkie trying to pick up signal, which was a nightmare. I spent 4 hours in the field that day and got a nasty sunburn as well. Now, if we're getting to the first female that we relocated, so she was moved 10 kilometers from the point of capture to point of release. And what was incredibly interesting about this particular female was that she would normally just stay within one general area. So her home range was about 0.2 square kilometers. And she was, in the beginning, frequently shifting burrows to try and find a place where she was comfortable. But initially what happened was she found 2 systems of burrows that she basically stayed at for approximately 2 to 3 weeks without literally moving, just hanging out in one burrow and not going out. It was really interesting to see how cautious this female was in comparison to the male that was just gunning it. We did observe this snake on 3 occasions foraging for food. She was hunting rodents, and she was also hunting other snakes. Now, one thing about zebra snakes that people also tend to miss, if you read any field guide, including mine, you will notice that everyone says that zebra snakes are strictly nocturnal. They just move at night. This is the only time you'll see them. And I can tell you now that this is not true. Zebra snakes move whenever the hell they feel like moving. And we observe them on numerous occasions during the day, especially early mornings from 7 to 11 was a typical time period when these guys were out. Basking usually took place during the summer months at least, from 7 o'clock. And then during the cooler months, they switched that down to 12 o'clock. So female 2, oh, there's a snake. So he's on his way to go and catch a snake. Yeah, the second female we relocated. She was moved about 10 kilometers. No, sorry, she was moved 15 kilometers from the point of capture. What was really interesting about her is that her home range was significantly smaller than the other male and than the previous female. So she had a home range of about 0.136 square kilometers. And she was extremely cautious. So at the point of release, this particular snake spent about 3 weeks in one hole without moving. She didn't go anywhere. She didn't move out. She didn't forage. She just came out to bask. And after that 3-week period, she started to move around, looking for food. So what this data actually in turn shows us is that short distance translocation, might be effective in terms of managing snakes. But because of the smaller sample size, it is not statistically significant, and we cannot make any deductions off of this just yet. But so far, the results have been promising. One of the biggest challenges, again, in a lot of these cases is just we need to find snakes that are large enough to fit trackers, which is why we want to kind of shift focus now and maybe either focus on black mambas, which will be fun, or working on something completely different like black spitting cobras, which is slightly bigger, or Cape cobras. But what it does show us is that if you move snakes a shorter distance and to habitats that they are more familiar with is the chances that they are going to move more frequently is going to be lower. And this is shown by the 2 females. Now, moving on to the male. And this is where it gets a bit crazy. So this is the male that was moved 20 kilometers. And you can just see how this snake was absolutely gunning it over the course of the period that we were tracking these snakes, which was about 6 months. Now, to give you an idea, the male's home range size in comparison to the 2 females was 1.4 square kilometers, which is significantly larger than the 2 females. Now, initially when we released the snake, he was all over the place, which is why you're seeing, all of the lines where he was and how frequently he moved. But eventually, when he was comfortable, he decided to settle. And what was really interesting was that this male just stayed in this general area and never moved out of it. But we were actually, very surprised to see the comparison with one male snake being moved 20 kilometers and the 2 others with a significantly shorter distance. Which raises the concern in terms of moving snakes over that boundary of 20 kilometers, because they are moving more frequently. They weren't moving in their natural patterns, which was during the night. This snake was observed on numerous occasions during the day, trying to find a place where it feels comfortable. And this is why so many of them die. Now, you have to take into consideration if a snake is not comfortable with its initial area, it's going to stop eating. It is going to move more frequently to try and get to a space where it feels more comfortable, and that increases the risks of predation. Now, if you look at all of the other studies that were done, vast majority of the snakes actually died because of starvation and predation. And this is why it happens, is because they're trying desperately to get back to a place where they feel comfortable and they feel safe. And snakes are not stupid. Many people think that snakes have no brains, they're dumb, they can't think, but these are actually intelligent animals in their own way. And it goes to show like what impacts we can have once we start messing around with nature and just relocating everything. So we need to be so careful in terms of how we do this. Really, it's a critical part of what we do. And I mean, think about it, 300 plus snakes in a season in Windhoek that needs to be relocated. You're going to saturate certain habitats, and probably vast majority of the snakes we relocate die. We're not sure. But this data can show us that long distance relocation or translocation can have significant impacts. So, yes. It could be, but again, we didn't have, males probably will have a larger home range in comparison with females. That is a possibility. But the question is it going to be significantly larger, up to 1.4 square kilometers? We don't know. We just don't have any data to compare that with. So I think from all of the papers I've read and the lit reviews I did was that the one thing that makes more sense to me is because the long distances that snake was moved. I see Francois Becker is thinking at the back as well. You can see his brain working, but you make a good point. It could be because it's a male, but I don't think that a male's home range would switch to about 1.4 square kilometers. I think it's going to be fairly similar to the females, maybe slightly larger. I think really what had a major impact on it was the distance we moved it. But it's a good question and one I have to look at. But here's where things also get a bit interesting. And here you can see the ranges overlapping. So what is quite unique in terms of what we found with this, was seeing that the male actually did spend some time with one of the females in a burrow. We found both of them together. Now you can argue that either this was predation, but it wasn't, fortunately, because they are cannibalistic and they eat each other. The female survived. We went back a couple of days later to make sure, and she was still there, and the male moved away. What we do suspect probably happened was that they did mate at some stage, more than likely, because that male was in the burrow for a full day, and it only moved out that evening. So, and what was really interesting was that that male was only in contact with one of the females over the course of the 6 months we monitored them. And usually the two females would pretty much avoid where that male would move in general, and they didn't cohabit burrows quite frequently. It was just on that one occasion. So if you look at, and here's where things get interesting, like if you look at that male's home range, it is like 7 times larger in comparison to the first female and the second female. And if you look at the one female, again, that was moved 5 kilometers further in comparison to the 10-kilometer one, her home range, again, was a tiny bit larger in comparison. So it gives us an indication that, these snakes are going to establish larger areas or move more frequently. And that female that was moved 15 kilometers was also a challenge at some stage because she moved out of range and we couldn't find her for about a week, and then she came back to the same area. So it's a tough thing, to try and figure out. But the data, to me at least, and how I see it, is that translocation really has a big impact on these animals. It is, it's a big issue that we are facing, and we don't know what the future holds for relocating snakes. So it would be interesting to pick all of the other scientists' brains that are sitting here tonight. So I also played around a bit, to try and determine, what species of, what woody species these snakes actually preferred. It was just a fun side quest for me, I suppose. Just to figure out what they tend to utilize. It makes it easier for me to find them in the future as well. But what you can see, what was really interesting was that in this area where these snakes were, the burrows they utilized often had camphor bush. So in most cases, whenever we went out and we monitored it, camphor bush was the bush of preference, if you will. I have a hypothesis as to why, because if you look at camphor bush, it's not a bush that is browsed quite frequently. So lower disturbances, which I think the snakes typically tend to prefer. The other one was also followed by Senegalia mellifera, which is the blackthorn, of course. But it wasn't really a common place to find them. They just mostly preferred camphor bush. And even if you look at like where they like to hang out, mostly in burrows, especially old rodent burrows, and in rocky crevices, which corroborates with what all of the field guides are saying, that these snakes like rocky outcrops, at least. So now we're not lying. But the burrows were quite interesting because it was always small mammal burrows, and the diameter of those burrows were usually less than 10 centimeters where they were hiding in. And what was quite interesting was that they would utilize the same burrow on a regular basis. At least once or twice a week, they will move back and forth going in there. And sometimes even if they were shedding their skin, they would stay in those burrows for about two to 3 weeks. We would find the skin and the snake is gone. In this area, we didn't do any small mammal surveys before release or any reptile surveys to see what the populations were like, which would have been nice to do, but unfortunately time didn't allow for it. But I think it's very important also, if you're selecting a habitat to release snakes, is to look at vegetation structure, prey availability, and refugia. I mean, this is what we need to work on. So perhaps if we identify certain areas which have good vegetation structures, high prey densities, and good densities of hiding spots, it might be more successful. But again, this is going to be dependent on species. I just think that some species will do better at relocation than others. In this study, we didn't lose, initially when we started it, we lost 2 snakes. One just disappeared, I think his tracker failed. And the other one was killed by a blue wildebeest while going down a burrow, so it was trampled on. You know, what's really interesting, if you go back into literature, you can also see that ungulates especially will target snakes in some cases and just whack them. So they're like people, they don't like snakes that much. Okay, so, you know, I'm not going to go into too much detail into this, but one thing I can say is that females seem to be a bit more cautious than males when it comes to relocation, but isn't that the same for humans, would you say? Where females in general are much more cautious and males are the ones that usually die? Probably. So, it probably makes sense why. But if you look at the data from this study, you know, it's very interesting to see how there's differences between sexes. The only unfortunate thing is, as I said, we didn't have males from a distance where we caught that were a bit closer. So we can't really make any distinctions off of this. One thing that, like I also mentioned, is I think that the females in general, why they were much more cautious and moved less frequently, was because the area was more or less the same as where we caught them. So they were kind of more familiar with it, which is my hypothesis. Again, I might be completely out of the loop with it. But if you look at all of the literature that is available, you know, again, it just says that moving of snakes, typically more than that 10, 15 kilometer range is going to have a significant impact. When we initially did a study on pufferers, which was just where we tested this out, was we took snakes, if they came close to camp, we would move them 800 meters. If they come back, a kilometer, etc., until they stopped coming to us. And what was really interesting was when we moved some of those snakes up to a kilometer, they never returned. So that they had no homing ranges. But if you look at pythons, for example, in the Everglades where they did studies, they relocated pythons and up to about 30 kilometers, and those snakes had home ranges and returned straight back to where they came from. With your smaller species like your cobras and what I suspect your mambas, is that the mortality rate is going to increase the more you increase the distance. More snakes are going to die in comparison to keeping them at a shorter distance. So it's not a very long presentation, but I have another surprise for you guys. We are going to milk a zebra snake for one of our other projects, but I am open to questions. So yeah, the challenge again with this study was just the sample size. We are going to publish it. It actually just finished peer review now. So I'm fixing the paper and then it would be submitted. And then I'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of the paper to see what they got. Any questions? Grill me. Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'll be the courier.
Thank you, Francois. I'm just fascinated by the fact that you say they go back to the same burrows. Now, if you think those things are inches above the ground, and therefore their visibility over a wider terrain is limited, how do they find those burrows again? And do they have scent things that they let out? Or, I mean, for them to become familiar with your ranges that you mentioned, how do they find them?
That's a very good question. Man, I wish I could hack a snake's brain to figure out exactly why, but I would probably speculate that they primarily rely on scent more than anything else. And look, snakes have relatively good eyesight as well, so they can see to a certain degree. But I think there is a possibility that potentially in areas where they feel comfortable, maybe there is a scent trail they can follow back. And I mean, we found, Kwesi, how many did we find back in or that male was in the same burrow at least 10, 20 times at least, yeah. So they know exactly where they're moving to, but I think that would have a lot to do with scent. What was also very interesting is that there was one very specific burrow that this male utilized to shed, which was literally based underneath a rock. And this male, whenever he had to shed his skin, he went straight back to that one. You can always almost guarantee when you find it that it's going to shed its skin. And we saw him on a couple of occasions and got his shed skin in that particular area on a couple of occasions as well. But 3 occasions, yeah. 3 times in the same burrow.
Yeah. John has them coming up.
Okay, thank you, Francois. If an improved successful rate of relocation is your objective, two questions. What would be your priority research question? What's the first one you'd like to look at? And to pursue that particular question, what do you need to do that? Do you need more people? Do you need more places to relocate? Whatever.
Good question. I think personally the questions we need to answer first and foremost when it comes to translocation, is this the right thing to do? You know, and what is the minimum distance that we can relocate snakes where we will have a success rate, which is, you know, which is a big problem for us, because right now the current program we're functioning underneath is, yes, we go catch a snake and then we relocate them. But is it the right thing to do in the long term? And just coming up with a baseline which the Ministry of Environment and Tourism can use and which can be you know, subjected to a policy change for the government and actually having guidelines to manage this moving forward. I think what we actually need at the moment is we need places where we can run this study. You know, with this study, unfortunately, the place we used to release is no longer an option. I mean, that was 5-6 years we were releasing snakes there, so I think the the big issue we're also sitting with is that there's sustained pressure on resident populations of snakes. No way of proving that, unfortunately, but yeah, so we're looking for more areas where we will have access to release snakes. Landowners that would be willing to have us there. And I think also one thing that we will need is funding, at least to cover the fuel of the of the snake catchers. To give you an idea, just on snake removals alone, my team drives about 1,000 kilometers a week for snake removals. And snakes are not rhinos or elephants or lions or cheetahs, so funding is a bit bleak. I was very fortunate with this project that the US Embassy funded it, so we were fortunate to get a grant to be able to do this work. But right now, obviously funding is done, so most of what we still do is out of our own pockets, which is tough.
Francois, thank you very much. It's really interesting. I wanted to, first just a comment. I think in any case, your data shows that your translocation, whether or not it's huge, like whether or not it works all the time, you've got a 60 to 80% survival of your animals. So, I mean, it definitely works for some animals. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is whether male-female interaction. I think it was quite cool that you got to, witness that and document that. Which you wouldn't have been able to do without your trackers. Were you able to look at the times? I mean, I know you had the two home ranges overlapping, but like the times when those animals moved in the same area. I don't know if you had looked at that data yet, but I guess I wanted to ask, did the male move around a lot less once he settled with the female for a while? I'm just wondering whether some of his movement is actually searching for females or whether, yeah.
I don't necessarily think it was just based on the female. I think that finding that male with a female was just by chance, actually. And he just stayed for like a day and moved on. What I think was also very important to note was the fact that this snake was primarily active and foraging. On 4 occasions between the times of 7 a.m., 6 p.m., and 7 p.m. we did find him busy foraging and looking for food. We actually got him hunting another snake, which is pretty wild. So what happened was we were following him. It was about 6 o'clock the evening. Christian was with me. So the zebra snake found something, went down the burrow, and like out of nowhere there was a 1.5 meter cobra that just shot between my legs, which the zebra snake was hunting. A little bit of pee did come out, in case you're wondering. So, but yeah, we have some data on it in terms of times. I just haven't analyzed that data as of yet. But I think that would be worthwhile including. Whether I'm going to do it in this paper, I don't know. I'm too lazy to go through that again. I'm sure you know the struggle. But but I think we did have some times when we observed them hunting and basking. So we have a relatively good idea of activity periods. What's also very interesting is how behavior started to shift when it started to get cooler. Like if you were looking at your snakes, for example, during the summer months, active much earlier in the mornings, and winter months, they were just starting to come out at like 12 o'clock and move all the way up until 6 in the evening and go straight down the burrows again, which is really strange. So no, our snakes don't hibernate. Any other questions?
Yes, a few more.
Thank you. My question is more, maybe slightly different. It's a personal one. When you relocate the snake, say you catch a snake here in Windhoek, how far out do you relocate them? Since they know how to find their way back to where they have been feeling comfortable and safe, what are the chances that they will come back? Or I might have another encounter with a snake maybe that's behind the mountain or the hill where I'm staying. What are the chances that the snake finds its way back? How far away are they relocated to?
Well, in the 18 plus years I've been doing this, I never had repeat offenders. So most of the time, we didn't have snakes that would return. Look, the distance we relocate snakes is between 15 to 20 kilometers. Now, remember, this is also going to be dependent on your species. Like for smaller species like your spitting cobras and mambas and puffer, well, mambas are not very small, but and puffers and those animals, I don't think they have home ranges similar to what you will see with your pythons, which have fairly good homing instincts. All of these snakes that we had in the study were relocated between 10 to 15 kilometers, with the one being moved the furthest 20, and they all established their own home ranges within that area and never tried to go back to the same place. Can you have more than one snake coming to your property? Yes, that is a possibility. You have to remember that in a lot of cases, what can potentially happen, especially if it's mating season, a female will leave behind a central. So let's say we come out and we remove a female, there's a possibility that a male might be hot on the scent. But it's very rare that we return to the same properties, you know, more than 2 or 3 times a month. I think in a year we can probably, we can probably return to the same properties about 2 or 3 times. Olive Palmer Street, for those of you living in Olive Palmer, is the busiest street in terms of snake activity in Windhoek. So, but look, it's dependent on a lot of factors. But I also want to clarify something. You know, this last year, in terms of snake removals, have been substantially lower than what we've dealt with over the course of the last couple of years. I mean, this season we removed about 150 snakes in comparison with previous years where we were running at 200, 300 snakes. So the drought had quite a significant impact as well on a lot of the snake populations that we're dealing with at the moment. But don't worry. Where do you stay, if you don't mind me asking? Ludwigsdorf. Not a bad street, don't worry.
Yeah, Francois, I've got a more domestic animal question related to snakes. To what extent do you see any association between the availability of dog food, especially during the day or during the night, acting as a magnet for rodents to come and look? And my contention is, if you see a snake, where's the dog food? Because there's a rat around looking for the dog food.
That's a very good question. So there's a lot of factors that actually contribute to human-snake conflict. So that's going to depend on prey availability, water availability, and other environmental disturbances. But specifically, what we've seen is quite a big issue in terms of attracting snakes is bird feeders. If you have bird feeders, that obviously with all of the seeds being wasted, that attracts rats and mice, birds of course, which snakes also eat. With dog food, I haven't seen any correlation in terms of dog food and rodents. Most of the cases where we're involved in, we typically tend to find that the people are either feeding birds, or they have birds that they keep, or they have chickens, or they have a lot of water, i.e. swimming pools, etc. But to give you an idea of one of the biggest things that we picked up was when the new road was being constructed that cuts towards the airport. So the entire area of Olympia and Ouwersblik was never really busy in terms of snake removals. And once construction of that road started, it was absolutely insane. I mean, we were getting 10 to 12 calls from that area, sometimes in a day, sometimes in a week. So I think habitat disturbances play a far bigger role, and extensive droughts and fires. What did you catch? Brown house snake. Thank you.
I think it's the smallest we
You could. So welcome to what we deal with on a daily basis. It's nothing venomous, by the way. It's a small house snake. But to also give you an idea in terms of you do remember the big fires that were at Elisenheim a couple of years ago. Those massive fires that just gutted that area. That snake season, we removed probably close to 200 snakes just on Elisenheim after that. So habitat disturbance, I think, plays a far bigger role than food availability and water availability. But that dynamic can shift, especially in times of severe droughts.
I'm going to behind for you first. Sven?
Yes, thank you very much for that very interesting talk. What I maybe missed is, or what I want to ask again then, please apologize if I missed it. What makes it actually distinctive in terms of whether it's 15 kilometers or 20 kilometers or even 50 kilometers and so on, so, that the mortality increases? If the snake is not coming back to its own habitat, that doesn't matter to me as a layman, whether it's now 15 kilometers away or 20 kilometers away or 15 kilometers away.
Okay, so that's a very good question to answer, but at least the hypothesis that's available in some of the research papers that have been published, and one very good one from Australia, which is titled Killing Them Softly, which talks on the basis of translocation. So what they did find, and one of the reasons why these snakes tend to die if you move them a further distance, let's say exceeding 20 kilometers, is that one, they're not used to that area. So they don't know where there's sufficient hiding place. They don't know where to find food. And necessarily they don't know where to find water. And what basically happens, according to the paper, is at least these snakes are moving more frequently in order to try and find an area, with which they're fairly familiar with, where they know they can find food and everything. And this is the primary reason why the mortality rates increase. Now, with the Australian study, they were very fortunate that they had resident snakes and translocated snakes, so they could compare the movement patterns between them. So what they found was with the resident snakes, they moved far less and far less frequently. And with the translocated snakes, what they found is they were moving much further distances, similar to what we saw initially with the male spitting cobra. We moved 20 kilometers. Some of those snakes, talking under correction, if I remember correctly in that study, moved between 1 to 2 kilometers in a day to try and get back to an area where they were familiar with. And basically what happened was they were picked off by predators, and some of them did not even eat. So the system just got a complete shock, and they were like, I got to get out of here and try to get to a place where I'm more comfortable. What would have been fantastic is if I could actually just have a data set which compared the two, because then we can see better, what it's going to look like and how the movement patterns actually differ, which is an unfortunate shortfall in my study, I would say. I hope that makes sense.
And then Clive.
Thanks, Francois. I'm enjoying this very much. I just have one question. Where I stay, I do catch a lot of puff adders and zebras. I have a lot of non-venomous ones as well. The non-venomous ones are just released into an open area right by us. But where I stay is also where the Kleinwinnig River flows, and there's a lot of water. So if I now take the puff adders away, they obviously now lose that water source. But I don't want to release them in the same area, because I'm not worried about them coming back. I'm more worried about them being killed, because there's a lot of local population that move up and down in that area, which is more dangerous to the snakes than, maybe move them 5 k's away or something like that.
having snakes around. Yeah, that's why no one touches my car. Every time people see my car, they stay very far away from it. But no, that's a good point. But I think what we always try to do when we relocate snakes is we try to identify an area where there's water and where we can see sufficient hiding space. So that might be one of the best ways, to do it. So I would, if I relocate, I'll look for an area where there's sufficient water, hiding space, and good cover. And right now, we're quite fortunate because we have a lot of water, except for the south. It's bone dry. But I think that would be my approach to it. I also think what's very important to remember, one thing I forgot to touch on, is that we're also trying to use this movement data to kind of figure out activity patterns of snakes and corroborate that to snake bites, which obviously is a big problem. Now, the primary reason why we selected zebra snakes is because it is the snake that is responsible for majority of the serious snake bites in the country. There is no other snake, not pufferers, not mambas, not horned adders or stiletto snakes that bite more people than zebra snakes do, which is a big problem that we have. And how these bites tend to occur, there's a specific time frame between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. is usually when bites occur. So we also thought it might be interesting to kind of look at the movement behavior of these snakes and kind of try and link that to when bites occur and how we can kind of plan ahead for it. So yeah, we have big issues with zebra snakes. It is a big problem. It is a snake that bites a lot of people. And it causes a lot of issues. No, there's no antivenom for it. And no, there will not be an antivenom anywhere in the near future for zebra snakes. There's a couple of issues with that. So it makes it very difficult. Maybe Francois Becker can pull some strings and we can get antivenom produced. He has the connections. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Francois, for the presentation. Just a quick one. Human-snake conflict, is there any organization that can compensate any death or injury in terms of human-snake conflict? Thank you.
In short, no. There's no organization that is going to compensate snakebite mortalities or mobility issues or anything to that extent. So in 2018, I addressed Parliament on the issue of snakebite, and this was one of the things that did come up. Actually, what should happen is that the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism should put this under the initiative of compensation, because they have it for when people get attacked by crocodiles or by lions, etc., etc. But that is not in the framework. So, and how the Ministry of Environment views it is that it is a public health issue, which kind of makes no sense to me. But there was no feedback in terms of the government's plan moving forward with snakebite. And it is a big issue. Because if we're very honest about how this thing happens and why we're doing the work we're doing, is because if you look at snakebite, it is something that affects the poorest of the poor, agricultural workers and people that literally live below the breadline, which is a major issue. So this is where 90% of your bites occur. It's a poor man's issue, if you can put it that way, which is why there's not a lot of attention to it. So initially the plan was also that we would start a snakebite clinic, which would have been run out of Central Hospital, but surprise, surprise, politicians and politics and medicine don't seem to mix, and that project was scrapped. At this point in time, we've made some progress. Katutura State Hospital is doing very well in terms of treatment. I've been very impressed in terms of how they've been dealing with it. But other referral hospitals in other regions is a massive issue. Give you an idea, when did we have that other bite? That was 3 months ago, yeah. So we were contacted about the individual that was bitten. This particular person was in a referral hospital in northern Namibia, and they basically refused to send this gentleman to Katatura State Hospital. So eventually the family had to take him out and move him to a private facility where he could get the treatment he desperately needed. In most cases, our public healthcare sector is failing when it comes to snakebite. It's a simple solution and it's a cost-effective solution. That's why we do what we do. We go out, we do the research, we use this data, we take that, and we can make a difference, hopefully, in people's lives. So I think that's why it's important, you know. Everyone hates snakes, but they have a role they play. Most of you would probably not know this, but a lot of the seeds that germinate also pass through a snake's digestive tract. There's a couple of good research papers that has been published on that as well. And obviously the snake venom used in modern medicine. And no, it wasn't in the COVID vaccine, so don't panic. I think that's why we're sitting in this position. And unfortunately, you know, to be frank and to be honest with you, the primary issue when it comes to any disease in this country or human-wildlife conflict or snake bites, whatever the case may be, as long as a politician is not affected by it, he's not going to do anything. And that is unfortunately the position we are in. In 2018, myself and Dr. Afuku, when we were in the Netherlands, we actually got funding from the EU to do a snakebite conference in Namibia. I think we got about 2 million to do that. The government was supposed to come to the table and match. And we would have had all of the world-leading experts in terms of toxicology, snakebite, snake ecology in this country, and the brains to pick. That fell through because the government simply just refused to come to the table. And that's the issues that we're sitting with. So do I see that compensation for snakebite victims is ever going to be on the table? No, that's never going to happen. It should happen because Kenya is doing it, Eswatini is doing it, so why can't we do it? Also, to give you an example, Eswatini is the only country in Africa that have stopped snakebite mortalities completely. Completely. The month of 2020 or the year of 2024, they had no loss of life, no loss of limb, because the government in Eswatini is coming to the table and helping the people. They have community projects where they're training snake handlers in every region to go out and to remove snakes. All of the anti-venom, everything is funded through the Eswatini Anti-Venom Foundation. It is readily available for any person. If there's not anti-venom at the hospital, Eswatini Anti-Venom Foundation sends it out. We can do the same. But politicians, again, there's so much red tape surrounding everything that is related to snake bites in this country, and that is, you know, unfortunately related to human-snake conflict. We get a lot of flack as well for the work we do, trust me. Yeah. Exactly. So for us, it's a big challenge as well. But we're trying. Don't give up hope.
There's still one last question. I think we're going to have to cut it. I think we can have lots of this discussion over a beer or whatever you choose a bit later.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm not drawing you back. I knocked off at 7. So I want to ask, you mentioned there's no antivenom at the moment. Say a person is bitten by a snake. What happens to them? Where would be, what do you do? You take them to the private hospital, let's say somebody that can't afford private hospitals, what happens?
So we're quite fortunate at the moment. So this issue that started in 2016 and that was aggravated in 2019, and then 2021, well, from 2020 to 2022, we basically had no antivenom in country. So there was a lot of red tape surrounding the situation because the government wants to see a GMP permit, and the South Africans at the time, well, still now are not producing antivenom because it's been mismanaged completely. It's gone to the dogs, unfortunately. So we're not getting any antivenom from South Africa. But right now we have a product from India, which is WHO approved, which has all of the GMP permits behind it, and which works relatively well. We used it about a week ago on a puffer bite, and the person made a full recovery. As of now, we have about 300 vials of antivenom in country. But I also want to touch on the point that antivenom is not the alpha and omega to snakebite. While it does help, you're still going to need long-term, different types of treatments that come with that. But with the training we've done, especially in government hospitals and in the private sector, we're feeling very comfortable, especially with the work that the guys at Katatura State are doing at the moment. Give credit where it's due. They're really good with snake bites. But this was also 5 years of bootlicking to get us there. But make no mistake, everyone always thinks that private hospitals seem to be the best adapted at dealing with snake bites. And I can tell you now from experience that I've seen just as many mess-ups in private hospitals from doctors as I have in state facilities. It's just simply because our doctors don't know. They're not trained. They get one lecture on snake bite at university. So, and that's about the knowledge they have. So that's why we came up with the guidelines and training, etc. Oh, special surprise for you guys. We're busy with the other project, so I'm quickly going to restrain a zebra snake. I'm going to milk it for you so you can see what the venom looks like. I'll send it around. If you're brave enough, you can drink it. It's a protein. But I think it would be quite cool for everyone to see how we do this and, what the project is. And then you guys can ask me anything you want.
Okay, so over to you. Okay, so where's the snake hiding first? Okay, do you want to be getting a running commentary?
I'll do some running commentary. So this is just a beaker that we're using to contain the venom after milking. And here we have just a small pipette, which we're going to use to suck up the venom from there. And then we're going to put it into this tiny container, which will be then left open for the venom to dry out. And then after that, we close it, and it gets put in a fridge, and it can be used for sequencing. So the idea of the venom project that we're doing is just to see what's the difference in toxicity between the venoms from different snakes in different areas. So we are running a black mamba venom project at the moment, and then alongside with, whenever we get zebra snakes, we also milk them. And this will be an ongoing thing for the next foreseeable year or two to get a big enough sample, and then we can, just for interesting data to collect. And then I just want to answer the lady who asked about the antivenom. It's that we don't have effective antivenom for zebra snake bites. Okay, so antivenom is not effective. The answer to that is quite simple, that in the venom samples, okay, hold on.
Labels are, the styrofoam is inside. Okay, so, sorry, I've done this a million times, so it goes a bit quick. But yeah, this is just basically.
I don't know how to do the microphone, but
yeah. You could just give it to me. I'll wing it. No worries. Okay, so yeah, right here I have a zebra snake. This one is big enough for a tracker. So I've done this on numerous occasions. So obviously through our work we collect venom. We run projects on it. We get students to run projects, and we're contributing to a lot to NUST, and we also contribute a lot to international institutions. Right now we're trying to get more Namibians involved in projects, so we can help them also to get to get their master's degrees, their honors and everything. So for us, this is very important. Now, There is currently a running project at NUST, which is why we're milking the snake in order to get venom for the students so they can run their project. But you know, this is a bit of a risky thing. So do not grab any snake behind the head. As many people have learned the hard way, especially if you don't know what you're doing. This is not the safest way of handling them, but for milking purposes, this is why we do it. Now, this snake is big enough for a tracker. And to give you an idea where that tracker is implanted, it's roughly in this area. So a small incision is made. The tracker is pushed in between the body cavity and the skin, and then the antenna is tied to the ribs in order to prevent it from migrating. The range on these trackers is about 1 kilometer and about 500 meters if they're down in a burrow. And the battery life on it is about a year. So after a year, you have to catch the snake and remove the transmitter again, which is quite tough.
So it's actually a good transmitter for pangolin as well?
No, not for pangolins. So pangolins are big enough to get satellite tags. For the pangolins, there's something completely different they tend to use, which they attach externally. Yeah.
But to make it less uncomfortable.
But your data set on that won't be good because pangolins move more than 1 kilometer, I believe. The trackers for the pangolins are quite good because the way they are attached is that they still have mobility and movement. So even if it goes down a burrow, that tracker just swings around. It's just unfortunate that we don't have the data sets with snakes just yet, you know, in terms of getting GPS loggers. Ideally, what I also want to do next is to look at temperature or basking times, which you can do. You get a small little device called the eye button, which you implant into the cloaca, which is basically the snake's butt. And that will give you temperature readings in terms of basking times, etc., etc. So, yeah. But let's move this bad boy.
I hope you don't get a cramp in your right hand.
No.
It's fine, otherwise he releases it.
Yeah. We can see how fit everyone in the room is if I drop the snake. Okay. Now that's a decent amount of venom. Yeah, no, he's in the mood to mess me up. Now, the way they inject venom, to give you an idea of how that basically functions, is that they have the venom gland is located roundabout in this area. Is located roundabout in this area just behind the eye. Now behind that we have the compressor muscle. So what happens is that compressor muscle pushes down onto the venom gland and basically forces the venom out. So then you obviously have the fangs, which it uses to inject the venom. And the opening of the fangs on spitting cobras is slightly different in comparison to those of your normal snakes. So these ones are positioned slightly above the tip of the tail, above the tip of the fang. Inside the fang of a spitting cobra, it makes a 90-degree angle bend. And the reason it makes this bend is because that's also how they tend to spit. So the pressure that is given by the snake is quite extreme in order to project that venom outwards. Now remember, snake venom is modified peptides and proteins. So if it gets onto your skin, it's not going to do anything. So for it to have any effect on me, is this snake will have to inject it into my body or spit and get the venom into my eyes. If you're spat by a zebra snake, for example, it's not going to absorb into your bloodstream. It's just going to cause a very painful burning sensation. You can go blind if you don't wash it out. But for this to have any effect, it has to be injected. So always remember that. So you can also see how the snake is biting. You know, you can see he's chewing a bit. But this is not a guarantee that he's used all of his venom. Now, you have to remember that snakes always keep a bit of reserve. So no matter if you milk them or not, this is still a loaded gun I have in my hands right here. So I'm going to let him bite one more time to see if we can get a tiny bit more venom. Now, also what we do is the way that we store venom is that we actually take it and we dry the venom. So it's a powdered form. The best way to describe it to you guys is it looks a bit like cocaine. If it's dry, you can sniff it, but only once. So that's pretty much what the venom looks like. Now, even if it is dry, it is still effective. It is still dangerous. So you have to be very careful with how you handle it. Make sure you don't have any open cuts or wounds or anything. But yeah, so if you guys want to come and quickly touch a zebra snake while he's deciding to bite, you're more than welcome to do so. Replenish. Yes. About 2 weeks to completely replenish the venom. So you can see the venom at the bottom. You see. There is one in there though. It's literally about 1.4. You can. It's like water. It's clear. So there's a specific protein that makes the venom yellow. Adenosine is the name of the protein. So adenosine gives it that bright yellow color, but spitting cobras don't have it. Wow.
Why is it not working with the user?
I can get to that. Get to that now. Then I can just explain to you. I just want to get him back into yeah, it's a beautiful specimen. That's what you call it. Actually, the temperature will be regulated by the temperature. Jeez, like this thing is just cunning. Okay. Fine. Stefan, just quickly want to mind. Let's go outside. Okay.
Okay, so the snake is being put back in the tube, hopefully. And I think Francois, whoa, there we are, has dropped it into the tube without mishap. So I think really thank you very much, Francois, for a most interesting talk. Yes, we've learned a lot and about the risks and what's going on in Namibia. And okay, so this is your final. Okay, so
yeah, sorry. Once the venom is contained, we'll send it around and everyone can have a look. Yeah, this is the fun part. Maybe Francois Becker with his steady hands can quickly come and help. Give him some lab work just because I feel like it. So I'm going to give this over to you.
Francois in my Afrikaans, I have to ask, I'm a dominee se kind. Is iemand met die gif oorgeslaan?
You want
Only the NG people will get that joke.
By the way, just in conclusion, there was a question in terms of why we don't have antivenom for zebra snakes. So there's a couple of issues. One, it was never included in the original production of the SAVP, ever. So that's one reason why it's not effective. Number two is it is a very expensive process to produce antivenom. Now, if you look at the cost of, let's say I want to start producing antivenom and I set up a lab, the cost price of that is going to be 150 million, just for the lab alone. Then you still have your clinical trials which you need to run, which is an additional 20 million. So we know this because we looked into it a couple of years ago. So no, it's not going to be viable. And antivenom is not there to make money, guys. I mean, I receive phone calls on a freaking daily basis of people that want to milk snakes and make antivenom. I'm sorry, but you're not going to make money, and that's not why this product has been developed in the first place. It's to save lives, not to enrich yourself. So if you come with that approach to me, I will chase you away or feed you to a crocodile or give you a mamba. Yeah. Well, apart from that, then you also have to go down to a molecular level. Now, in terms of what the zebra snake bite does, and this is not just zebra snakes, but spitting cobras in general, is the anti-inflammatory response the bite itself causes around the area you're bitten closes off everything. So the molecules of the antivenom is too large to reach the affected areas, which is why we have a very poor success rate in terms of it. So this is one of the biggest challenges that we have when it comes to antivenom and to all of this. There was a project in the 90s that was run to try and produce an antivenom, but that fell short because there was no financial support for it. So right now, we treat it conservatively. Okay, so that concludes it. So here's the venom for those of you that want to see. Please don't drink it unless you really want to. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so I'm sure there's lots of room for discussion with the snake people who are in the audience here and with Francois. Thank you very, very much. And I invite you all to share a beer with us. We have got a bottle of something interesting for our speaker. I almost forgot, it's not venom. Thank you very much, Francois. Okay. Just one last word from the sponsors that Namibia Breweries do give us the beer that we're about to drink in the back, but you are invited to make a donation to our kitty, so don't think it's entirely for free. There we are. Okay, thank you very much for an interesting evening. Thanks one and all. Good night.